morning and welcome to Vantage Point. I'm Marcia Boyles, and as always, I'd like to introduce my partner. What is your name again? I have to stop. Kathleen Taylor, and I do have to stop and think about your title.
Yeah.
You are a clinical social worker at the medical center now.
That's right.
Kathleen, today we're going to be talking about something that we really haven't addressed in Vantage Point before. But you and I both think is important, and that is the issue of emotional and mental health in aging. This is your area of expertise, so this is going to be one program that I defer to you in terms of expertise. This is certainly your area.
Well, we shall see. I hope I do a good job.
Well, I don't have a doubt in the world. Let's start by saying that in order to prepare for this, one of the things that I did several weeks ago was to send out emails to friends and acquaintances asking for people to comment on what their major concerns were in terms of mental or emotional health here as residents of Green Spring. And we got some extremely interesting results, I think. Do you have anything to say before we get into those?
Just that I think that what the people you talked to or that replied to your query responded with was a pretty comprehensive list. You know, it was, nothing surprised me for sure, but also very consistent with what I have observed about what people are experiencing.
All right. So that puts it in context. I think I felt a bit the same way, that there weren't a tremendous number of surprises, but there was pretty much consistency in these replies. I got something like 25 replies. The major concern, I guess not surprisingly, is loss of memory, dementia. Both watching it in our friends here and also being concerned about it happening to some of us. We're all seeing some memory issues, some memory changes, some cognitive changes in aging, and that seems to be there are normal aspects of that, but the dementia itself, I think, is of huge concern to folks. It's just greatly feared, truthfully. The second thing, in terms of the number of responses, was concern about depression. And depression, it was indicated, could be caused by any number of particular concerns and stresses. One of the primary ones was loss of hearing and loss of vision, or loss of vision. That happens to so many people here, and that it causes such social isolation that it in itself is a cause of great depression frequently. Another concern that seemed to be creating depression was loss of independence, or a fear of loss of independence. Just not being able to live on one's own safely. The need in some cases to go to Garden Ridge was a real concern. The third aspect of depression was loss of particular abilities for doing things that people valued, and this included, of course, loss of driving ability, loss of being able to read in some cases. One of the more interesting, I thought, and kind of amusing responses in that regard was one of our residents who indicated that he resented not being able to protest, go down to the marches or to go to the protests. That was something that really bothered him, that he was unable to do that any longer, which I kind of liked. One of the other large aspects of aging is loss and grief, loss of spouses and loss of friends here. That was one of the main contributors to depression, both of those things, which I think we've all had some experience with. The issue also of social isolation because people's kids and grandkids are so busy. that they simply didn't have time to pay much attention to the residents. That it was felt. And some residents indicated that they felt sometimes unloved because their kids were just too busy to, call them or communicate with them in any way. So that was a concern, and the idea that, of course, we've got to understand that kids and grandkids have very busy lives, and rightfully so. I think the aspect of being too ill oneself to participate socially also creates isolation, and sometimes the illness of friends causes isolation. So social isolation was also considered to be one of the primary causes of depression here, which absolutely made sense. Another fairly major contributor to concern about emotional health was caregiving stress. For those who, particularly with spouses who need to have a caregiver. End of life issues certainly was a concern of people. And then there were a number of sort of small things, but I think fairly ubiquitous, things like not being able to sleep, sleep issues. I think is a very common thing among folks, and it created stress.
Yep.
There was no question about it. Another one was and I think this is an area that you are going to talk more about, and that is adapting to changes. Specifically at Green Spring, the dining services has a tendency to about every week change some rule or procedure or something. It's just constant. And it's been going on now for several years, so it's not anything new, but it is creating stress. And legitimately, it is creating stress.
Right.
I think what I came away with after seeing this laundry list of not terribly attractive kinds of things, in some cases at least, is that Betty Davis's famous quote of old age is not for sissies, it absolutely applies. So that is the list from the residents. And as you're saying, probably no surprises.
Right. And just going through that list, it can sound pretty overwhelming,
grim,
for sure,
yes.
And grim. So one of the things at some point I want to do is just bring some balance to that, because we didn't query people about what the positives were. We only did talk about what the emotional problem areas would be. But I think that, again, just trying to put it into a little bit of context, is that at every part of our lives, we have challenges that are specific to that part in time in our life. And if you were to write a list on of what the emotional concerns were of being a teenager, or being, a young adult, being a parent, if you had that same list, there would be an equally overwhelming and daunting list from those people as well. So I think that basically what we know about life is that stress is unavoidable. That these kinds of challenges to us are not going to go away, and that
it's just a new set.
It's a new set. I mean, it's really a new set. And what some of them may be perceived as familiar, and that I did sort of have these kinds of experiences before, and I know how to handle them. But some of them are truly very different. Yes. And so I think that is where people have to start thinking about, as you said, how they're adjusting to change. So I guess probably the main thing that I want people to think about is that since we know that you're going to be having challenges, the question is, how do you adjust to those challenges? How are you able to adapt in a way that is positive and constructive and will contribute to your quality of life? And that can be hard sometimes.
Well, I think that's right. I think we all feel like there are fewer guidelines and fewer examples, and we have fewer rules, we feel like, in terms of aging issues. We simply don't know what they are. I think at other stages, I mean, if you're a new parent, or there seems to be a lot of information, there's a lot of sharing, I think. But I think we just don't know. We don't know what the roadmap looks like.
Yeah, that's probably true. And I do think that everybody in their particular stage of life does kind of feel isolated and alone, no matter how much information there is. I mean, there's a lot of information about aging, and there's a lot of opportunity to share. But I think that at some point, people just start to feel that it is all on them. And then they do feel overwhelmed and sometimes feel hopeless and helpless, and it just becomes too much. And that is where you can get in trouble.
Describe trouble. Are you
trouble
talking
means?
about self-isolation and things of that sort?
Well, trouble means when you are at a point where you don't feel that your life is meaningful, you see the negatives more than the positives, that you again feel hopeless or helpless,
Okay.
Just overwhelmed, I think, and a little bit out of control. So those are times when it's hard for you to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that is a time when I start thinking about, from an emotional or mental health standpoint, what does that person need to be able to be hopeful, to feel less helpless, to feel like they do have the ability to cope and manage these stressors that are coming at them.
All right, what is the answer?
Well,
Or what are the answers?
The answers, I think this is very complicated, obviously, and for every thing that you had on your list, there are layers and layers and layers of reasons why this might be happening for any given person, because it's very individual. And I think probably just to think about how we react to stress in general, everybody reacts differently because it's based on their learned experiences, what skill set they bring into it, what their health is important. Health, if you have some health problems, I think that really impacts your energy, the energy that you have left over.
Physical health.
Be able to, yes, the physical health impacts the energy that you have to be able to deal with some of these difficulties as well. So I think that it's just really very individual in how people start to think about coping with these situations. But the first thing is really an awareness, maybe, that this has gotten hard. But also, I believe that probably with mental and emotional health more than anything, people feel like it's up to them. They feel like they have to do it alone. And so there's a little bit of reluctance to reach, like you said, share. There's reluctance to reach out and share how they're feeling, because they feel like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't be feeling depressed, or I shouldn't be feeling anxious. Or if I am, it's my responsibility to try to figure it out on my own. So it's kind of closing off opportunities to be able to get unstuck. I think at that point people are feeling pretty stuck.
Yes, I think in a lot of cases people will say things that I have said it myself. If I go to dinner and I put a smile on my face, sometimes I can even convince myself that everything is fine. And socializing, I think, often does help.
Oh, absolutely.
And sharing.
Yeah, socializing is really key, because it can kind of bring you out of your bad mood, but also the reverse of that is what you also said is that if people start to feel really down and their mood is depressed or they feel really sad, that it's hard for them to bring themselves
to socialize,
to go out.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
and that of course feeds on itself too. The more you stay home,
Yes.
the more that sort of reinforces your feelings of sadness, and so it ends up becoming a bigger and bigger problem at some level because you're reinforcing that.
Yes, yes.
So then it becomes a question of, if you're in this situation where you feel this way, can you motivate yourself to move forward in a positive direction?
Okay. Yes, I think anybody, I mean, we've all been stuck sometimes.
Yep.
And absolutely, there's an inertia that sets in.
Yep, that's right. And so the question or the answer to that a lot of times is you really can't. It's really hard to pull yourself out of that on your own. That whole, what's that saying about pull yourself up by your bootstraps or whatever? I think that people feel that they should be able to do that, but the reality is sometimes it's really hard to do.
Yeah, and it can go on and on and on sometimes.
Well, it can, and I think there's a point where you do kind of tend to lose perspective or think, well, this is just my life now.
Yes.
That I'm old and I'm not going to be happy anymore, and I'm, just going to be depressed. And that is, more than anything, the thing that I want to get across is that that doesn't have to be that way. That there are things that people can do that can help relieve those feelings and bring joy and happiness back into their lives.
Yes, what you're saying is if you've just sort of given up and feel totally stuck, you need to get unstuck.
Yeah. And I think since we know that when you're stuck, it's hard to
take any action.
Do that. That's where we, really look at, how you can get help.
Okay, how can one get help?
Well, I think that, we have mental health specialists here at Green Spring in the medical center, and that would be myself and Pat Ferrari as well, to provide counseling for helping people to really just sort through how they're feeling. I think that back in the day, therapy sounded very big. It sounded like, I think, mumbo jumbo to a certain extent.
Well, it was big. I mean, I think because people talked about doing it for years.
Right. Well, that's the Freudian therapy, where psychoanalysis,
Right.
that you are basically in therapy for the rest of your life.
Right.
That's not the case anymore. That when we talk about therapy, we talk about brief, solution-based therapy. To really just deal with the specific problems that people are having. We're not looking deep into their childhood and looking for causes, 50, 60 years ago. We're really just trying to look at what's going on now. And a lot of times it's the way that people are thinking about the problem. So we can help people to be able to change their and adjust their thinking about that problem in a way that will free them up to be able to move forward. And sometimes it can be, really quick. All of a sudden, it's just like, oh my goodness, is this what I was doing? Is this the way that I've been keeping myself stuck? Is to just have this expectation or this. I talk about shoulds a lot. We all walk around with a lot of shoulds in our head about I should be doing things this way. I should be perfect. I should be smarter. I should be, whatever.
Politer.
Whatever. Everybody's
nicer.
got a million of those, and those did kind of get planted in our childhood. I think it's
Oh yes. For sure.
To be to be a certain way, and to be able to examine those because sometimes they're just not valid anymore. We can let go of those. Good enough is good enough. We don't have to be perfect anymore.
Oh, I like that.
But
could you give us some examples? I don't know whether that's feasible or not, but Can you give some practical examples of being stuck and then getting unstuck?
Well, I think it's expectations that people have of themselves, and so it's like, I mean, I think sometimes an example is the physical changes that people feel, and they're real and they're experiencing. And if you wake up every morning and say, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be able to get up and walk 5 miles, and I can't. So this mile that I'm walking isn't good enough. Then, then that's going to make you feel less than when you're doing a great job of getting up and walking a mile every day. So you're not even allowing yourself the satisfaction of a job well done because your expectations are always higher.
Well, and I suppose if you eat dinner with a group of folks every night and you just really don't want to do that every night anymore, you could be beating up on yourself because you just don't have the energy to do it.
That's right. A lot of times that's a really good point. It's about giving yourself permission to go easier on yourself. And sometimes that's another thing that's hard to do for yourself. Sometimes you need another person to give you permission, to give yourself permission.
Yes, okay.
You can't sort of let yourself off the hook as easily. So, so a lot of times I think that counseling or therapy, is about having somebody else give you another perspective on your life and how you can think differently about what's going on.
All right, that certainly makes sense. And you're talking about a practical, short-term kind of therapy.
Yeah, and very based on what the person is bringing to the session. What is bothering them, and then being able to kind of. We do talk about peeling the onion a little bit in terms of trying to figure out what's going on. The other thing that we do a lot, because stress is so much a part of what people are experiencing, stress overload, that there's just layers of stressors, and with not a lot of time in between to recover. And that's a lot of wear and tear on your body, and it's also a lot of wear and tear on you emotionally, and that's where you really do start to have a lot of emotional symptoms of what we were talking about earlier, which is just feeling overwhelmed and out of control, wanting to kind of hide away and, not feeling motivated to do things that you would normally be able to do. And
really enjoying nothing.
And not enjoying things, not enjoying your life anymore. So, so a lot of the things that we'll do sometimes are stress reducer exercises. And, we've talked about breathing a lot, and I know that you have experienced firsthand that being able to kind of breathe your way through a stressful experience really is so helpful.
We had a program on this 3 or 4 years ago now. Yes, and we were all just amazed at the difference
it's really
that made.
And so, I mean, that's something that we will help people to learn and practice.
Okay.
Because it's something that, you need to be able to do it kind of almost by rote, and that way, when you find yourself getting stressed out, that is something that you can do to kind of relieve that stress.
And that's immediate.
It's immediate. It's very immediate. And we have other things that, we can help people with, just skills, that they can learn to be able to relieve stress. And they're very effective. And they're, other than the fact that you have to commit to doing them on a regular basis.
There are exercises effectively.
So I think they're really, what we're talking about is just having people learn maybe a new set of skills that they haven't had previously on how to manage challenges such as a lot of change, and also the stresses associated with some of those changes that are occurring.
One of the things that you and I talked a little bit about was the fact that we all seem to be less flexible, both emotionally and physically, as we're aging. And what is that about? I mean, we're less adaptable, I think, is the phrase that one could use.
Yeah, I think that's probably a lot of things, but I think more than anything else, it does come down to, I think it really does come down to the stressors that people are experiencing, because all right, so I think we've talked about this before. I mean, the stress reaction is really that fight or flight reaction that we have. Fight or flight or freeze, actually.
Yes.
You know, if you're in a stressful situation and you can leave it, that's what people will do, or you might be able to fight your way through it. But a lot of times we don't either have either one of those options. So the freeze is just kind of, stay in place, don't move, and hope it goes away. And I think that happens a lot with us, is that, when we're inundated with all of these challenges, and some of them can be pretty rapid fire, and affecting not only you, but people that you're close with. And so if you don't have any relief from those stressors, then you almost just freeze in that, let's just hide and wait till things get better mode, and you lose all of your ability to be moving forward in any kind of way. So I think that's the inflexibility. Then we start to just hang on to what we have done previously, even though we know at some level that hasn't worked. We just kind of keep trying and trying and trying and trying the same thing, and don't have that perspective that it's not working. And there again, it's having that other person to kind of say, hey, you've done that a couple times. How'd that work for you? And then, sorting that through. So we like to, I think Pat and I both have talked a lot about, we like to use humor a lot. We like to use different kinds of approaches that are pretty light. It's not heavy kinds of conversations. It's really to try to provide a perspective, but have it in the context of this is what being human is all about. We're all struggling every day, so let's figure it out together.
All right. Well, I think this is extremely helpful, and I also should thank all of the residents that bothered to respond, because that was enormously helpful to us.
Yeah, that was great. That was really good. I should mention that since we were talking about stress, that Pat and I are doing a presentation on understanding stress on March 13th, and I see that we've got the information up. So I do encourage people to come to that. It's being presented through Erickson Advantage. They're the
reservations required?
No, people can just drop in. So that might be a little bit of a interesting segue into the possibility of maybe doing some work with one of us.
All right. Are you giving practical
We are.
Okay.
We absolutely
answers
are.
to stress? All right.
Yep, we're going to do some what we call experiential, so helping people practice some breathing exercises, some relaxation exercises. So.
Oh, that's terrific. We have not had such a.
We haven't. I think that what's so important, and what I'm so happy about in terms of being at the medical center, is that now there's two of us, and I think Pat was stretched pretty far, so now we're really better able to help more people.
Good.
And so I would encourage people to not be afraid of the idea that, counseling is a scary thing. It really isn't.
Does Medicare cover it?
Medicare and other health insurances do cover it. So
we could also remember to give a plug for the Now, third time rescheduled, Exploring Your Legacy Forum.
That's right, that's right.
Which
Yeah.
is March 28th at 1:30
Yep.
in the Hunters Crossing
That's
Conference
right.
Center.
And I will say that exploring your legacy is very therapeutic. So that's another way for people to be able to get a perspective on their life.
Okay, well, good. That put it in a different context
I
than I
know.
had thought about the Legacy Farm.
I know.
Yes, and we're excited about that forum. I think it's the second forum that we've given on Legacy, and the first one was very successful.
That's
so we
right.
look forward to that.
So I guess we're done, huh?
I think we are.